like breaking, we are taking, this is our time. Just breathe, this won't be a hard fight. The truth cash out in the night.
What's up, Johnny? How's it going, buddy?
Everything's going good, man. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing really good, really good. The AC broke today, but feels like we did the right trick. I got it fixed, and it's starting to cool down in the house. So still got the fan, so let me know if it bothers anything, and I'll shut the fans off. But
Yeah, as of right now, I can't hear it, man. That's rough being in Florida without air conditioning. How long was it out?
don't know. When I got home, it was a broiler. So,
No.
but it feels great now. We're doing good. So, um,
Well, that's good,
how's your renovations going?
man. The contractors they end up being, it's kind of hard because you don't unless you know somebody personally. Uh, it's really hard to know. It's very hard for me to have strangers in my house, number one, and you don't ever know if they're going to do a good job, if they're going to rip you off or what. We got four different estimates, all the way from about $12,000 to $40,000 for the same job. So
Wow.
it's total insanity. But we got lucky with these guys; they're doing a good job. One of the bathrooms is almost completely done, and now they're gonna skip a week because they got another job, and then they're gonna start on the basement. That should take about 10 days. But interesting enough, when he came over to do the estimate, we were in the garage where I had the Sasquatch unredacted banner up, like the one you got right there, and
Right.
walking around talking or whatever. He's like, "You got a podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, got a Sasquatch podcast." He's like, "You believe in those things?" I'm like, "Dude, I've seen these things." And he starts going, and that's actually why I hired him, is because he's a super honest individual, even to the point to where he kind of pissed me off a little bit when it came to the Sasquatch stuff. He straight up said he didn't believe in them, and uh, he was like, and I explained one sighting, and I hate starting from like a cold open where you don't know the person,
Right.
and
Right.
you're trying to explain to them Sasquatch. It feels like when you're driving down the road and highway patrol pulls out behind you, and you haven't done anything wrong, but you've got this feeling like, oh crap, this guy's gonna think I'm full of garbage. But he was like, oh well, one day, your mind plays tricks on you, your eyes play tricks on you. I was driving down the road one day, and something about he thought the road ended, but it didn't, or whatever, because it was the optical illusion or whatever. I'm like, dude, that's not it. Anyway, a week goes by. He's over here. I get to meet him, his partner. Cool guys. Really, really like them. And we're sitting on the front porch, and I talked to his buddy about the Sasquatch, and then I started showing them videos, and then their eyes got this big, and they're like, I showed them the growl video, and they're like, oh crap, we never knew. We've never known anybody that did this before. We didn't realize these things were real, or what. They're actually. It's a big difference between the first day he was here and then when I talked to him. Once you start showing people the evidence,
Oh yeah.
some people, most people are like, well, maybe there's something to it. Now, they may not completely 100% believe me, but, oh, actually, let me show you guys something. This is pretty cool. I want to brag on this guy. Hold on one second. Before we bring our guest in, I'll make this very quick.
Sure. Go ahead. We-
He actually, one of the contractors, he started doing his own version of magic cards, kind of like Pokemon and Magic and all that stuff. Well, he said that our conversation was inspirational. So
Oh,
he went home and he made like a magic card for the
nice.
game that he's creating.
Oh
And
wow.
so it was actually pretty cool, man.
That is
I like it when things come together like that.
that is pretty awesome.
Yeah, pretty neat stuff.
Yeah. I got the only thing I got Steve Cole's book in the mail. I finally got his
Oh, really?
book. Yeah, he wrote many of them, and I had to go through them to figure out which one I wanted. So I got the Squatch Detective's Guide to Bigfoot Investigations because he's a private investigator. And the book
Right.
goes into how to proper interview somebody, key things that they may say or do that might let you know if they're telling the truth or not, stuff like that.
Right.
It's a really cool book. So any of you guys, I got it on Amazon. Just basically put in Steve Cole's name and his books will come up. And he's actually our guest on the next show. So we're off next Friday, and then the following week we have Steve Cole's coming on. So we were going to have him. He's rescheduled. I'm really looking forward to that interview. Really looking forward to it. So
Yeah, that should be a good one. We
So I'm gonna
actually
huh?
we got that other guy. I forgive me, I can't remember his name. The guy that's been emailing us, that's
Right.
been on other podcasts. I've been listening to his, and he's got a pretty profound, some crazy stories. So that should be a good one. We're gonna try to get him in here within the next couple of weeks if he's free.
Awesome. Well, tonight's guest is Brian Godhard. I hope I said that right. Godhard. Great guy. I got to talk to him on Wednesday. I usually call the guests on Wednesday prior to the show and shoot the breeze and get to know them and stuff. Really liked him. Hit it off great. He's a great guy. Very grounded. Very, definitely focused, and he's got a keen sense for forensics, and that's really good. The physical evidence and everything. Like I said, we had a great conversation, and I'm going to bring him on so everybody can say hi to him. What's up, Brian? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How you guys doing?
Good.
Now that my AC is working.
Yeah. Brian, where are you from?
I am in Cleveland, Ohio area.
Cleveland, Ohio. Okay.
Yeah.
So is that you guys call him the grass man up there?
I've heard that. I never, growing up in Cleveland, I never really heard anyone actually call him that. But I guess out by Canton, that's kind of a thing.
Right.
In that area. It's only about an hour and a half from us, so not that far, but a big difference in how we refer to him.
Right.
But yeah, the grass man was from the 1970s. It was 1978 when there was a rash of sightings out in Minerva,
Right.
Ohio.
Pretty cool.
Started calling them. Yeah. Ohio's quite the mecca for sightings. That's surprising. I wouldn't pick Ohio if I threw a dart at the map, but sure
Right.
enough, we seem to have quite a few here.
But it's famous for the Ohio House, which is a very famous vocal that we hear.
Oh, yeah.
And it really became the litmus test for vocals. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Patty being the litmus test on what Sasquatch is. Those howls and the Sierra sounds are the two probably most prominent sounds that we hear.
That's true.
Why do you think they call it the grass man in Ohio?
I'm not sure why they ever started calling it that. I mean, it's that part of the area outside by Canton, North Philadelphia, Minerva, is a lot of farmland. So it very well could just be something to do with the farms and all quite literally fields of grass. Ohio's relatively flat in this part, and then as you go south, it gets a lot hillier.
Right.
Foothills of the Appalachians, stuff like that. So there's probably just a lot of fields and things like that. That in 1978, Sasquatch or Bigfoot was not as well known as he is now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there wasn't the same kind of instant notification media. You know what I mean? You had to wait for the national news to come on at night to see what's going on around the country. Otherwise, you had no idea. It's not like you could just, or, a week later, you'd read it in the newspaper. So I think that might be part of it too. Just the terminology, just people didn't realize there's other names,
Right. It's already been labeled. They probably didn't realize that.
Yeah. In 1978, that part of Ohio, it's pretty rural. There's probably was barely a town. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they probably just came up with something and it kind of stuck regionally, and they just kind of been around ever since.
I think the name Sasquatch too. Isn't that from Canada? It's an Indian name from Canada.
That
Yeah.
is the First Nations tribe in Canada. Basically, it means wild man in their language.
So that one pretty much stuck.
Yeah, that one has really stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, they nailed that one for sure.
Yeah.
So how'd you get involved in all this, Brian?
I'd say it has to go back to unsolved mysteries in the mid '80s, late '80s. You know, when they would do the Bigfoot sightings or the UFO sightings or the ghost stories. I just couldn't get enough.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, unsolved mysteries ran forever. So there was always something on about the supernatural, paranormal, cryptids. You know what I mean? And also
Yeah.
being in Ohio, you know, you just hear a lot of stories in the area growing up about Bigfoot, stuff like that. And then the Mothman, of course, right on the other side of the Ohio River in Gallipolis, or Point Pleasant, West Virginia, but Gallipolis, Ohio, where the Silver Bridge collapsed. No, I mean, it was all fascinating to me. You know, I would check out books at the school library. You know, usually they only had like 2 or 3 books on anything. So it was always the same ones over and over again. But you know, then sightings in the '90s, things like that, and documentaries started to come out, and you know that started to kind of become a thing, and it just kind of escalated from there. It's just one of those things. It's kind of like once you get the taste for it, it never goes away. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Are you into other things besides Sasquatch?
I'm open to everything. There's too many questions in my mind that are unanswered. It just bugs me, and I'm naturally curious. I like to explore, so I can't help but wonder what else is out there. And the reason
Yeah.
I say that is if you look at Native American lore going back hundreds, if not thousands of years, they talk about things that they saw, you know, that were told that don't exist today. But then why would they talk about them? Why would they draw pictures? Why would they make carvings? You know, things like that. How did the Europeans look at a picture of a Sasquatch painted on a wall and say that's some kind of ape? If there's no apes in North America, how did the Native American population know what an ape looked like? You
Right.
know what I'm saying? It's just too much doesn't make sense. And if you really dig deep into it, you can find wild man stories all the way back to ancient Samaria, Babylon, ancient Greece. You know, Great Britain has them way back in the beginning of their recorded history. Romans have myths about them. So it's not just an isolated incident either about, and it's not just Bigfoot either. There's dogmen go all the way back to Egypt, you know, things like that. So, and you know, you can take any culture in the world and there's some kind of cryptid or some kind of creature that of legend that still seems to be active today. You know, let's face it, the world's a big place. There's still a lot of undeveloped jungles. There's still a lot of rainforest that we haven't destroyed yet. I mean, even just look at the United States. Look how big the Pacific Northwest is, or
Mhm.
narrow it down to Alaska. The Alaskan wilderness is twice the size of the state of Texas, and who knows what's living back there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we still find stuff. You know, there's stuff that gets discovered all the time. A lot of times it's fish or plant life, but every now and again you'll see a mammal gets discovered, and a large one at that. So in my mind, if they're still discovering things, then there's still stuff out there. You know,
Right.
and yeah, that to me has always been the attraction. I want to know what they are, where they come from. You know, are they intelligence? Why do they avoid us? And how are they so good at it? You know, so it's to
Now,
me, it's
are you
all.
doing field research?
I do everything. I do a lot of research at home. I go into the woods, and generally a solo act, so I usually just go out and pick a tent somewhere and then roam around, set up some cameras, look for signs that maybe something was there.
Right. Now, you and Richard are already talking, so forgive me if I ask you questions that he's already asked you, but
Well, by all
have you
means,
had interactions yourself?
I had one interaction with one my friend and I believe was a Sasquatch. We were 16. My parents at the time had 12 acres just over the Ohio line in Pennsylvania. And it was just an old trailer camper kind of deal on there. And it was just something that we would go to on the weekends, every couple of weeks here and there. Sometimes it would be every weekend for a month. Sometimes it would be 2 or 3 months without going. So no real consistency. And the reason I say that is later I'll explain why I say that. But, so we had these cheap Walmart paintball guns, and my best friend PJ and I, by the way, we're still best friends till this day. So we still talk about this. We were playing paintball all weekend, and in our infinite wisdom as 16-year-olds, we thought it would be a good idea to go play at night. So we waited till about 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, and we went out to the woods. And of course, we couldn't see each other, so that was a problem. And I think at one point we tried duct taping laser pointers to our paintball guns so we could better aim at each other. And unfortunately, we think a lot alike. So at some point, we also ended up taking him off. And I stuck mine on a tree branch. He stuck his on a stump. So I would think I was shooting, and then he was going to try to see where I was shooting from and then come in and get me. Of course, we had the same idea, so it just went completely nowhere. We're just aimlessly shooting at each other. You can't tell if we're hitting or not. So I thought I had doubled back. And there's 2 ponds on the property, what we would refer to as the back pond. I doubled back around that off of the main trail. I thought I had gone around him, is in my thinking. And I was laying down in some brush, kind of doing just watching a little bit, slowly creeping around, trying to make sure he didn't see me. And as I came around the back pond, I thought I had him dead to rights. I had probably hit the biggest shit-eating grin on my face you've ever seen, because he had nailed me earlier in the day pretty good. I had a big welt on my chest, like literally sticking my shirt out. So I kept going slowly, and then I got to a point where I felt comfortable, so I started taking shots. And I fired a couple times, and at this point, I was sure I hit him. I had to have. But nothing really happened. He didn't react. And I was like, well, maybe I'm really that bad of a shot. Moved in a little closer, and he starts standing up. And I am 6'8" tall. I was this tall at 16. So I was approaching this thing, and it starts standing up. And at the time, I still thought it was PJ. I had not realized there was something else out there. Never even occurred to me, Well, this thing's standing up, and I realized, well, wait a minute. It's about as tall as I am. He's only 6'4". He's short, It's still going, and I'm just kind of standing there. And it's a weird feeling for a very tall person to see something or someone taller than you. You're just not used to it. And this thing kept going. And by the time it stood up and I saw its head kind of straight down, I was like, all right, my fight or flight response was already engaged, and I was ready to go. And I ran faster than I've ever run in my life down that trail, because I had no idea what it was at the time. The idea of a Sasquatch didn't even occur to me at that moment. It's just something was massive out there, and it wasn't him, and it wasn't me, and it sure as hell wasn't human. It was covered in fur, and it was easily 2 to 3 feet taller than I was. So as it turns out, I ran down towards the main trail. PJ was on that trail. He had been on the opposite side of the woods, on the other side of this thing. He thought he'd double back and caught me red-handed. And he was taking shots from the other side. And then when it stood up, he came to the same conclusion, because he about knocked me over. I went to the trail, and I started to turn around to my left, would have been his right. And, he literally about ran me over like a bulldozer. And we stopped and kind of looked at each other. I looked to my left, his right, kind of look over, and there was something standing in the woods. It was a lot bigger than we were. And we looked at each other and took off and ran faster than we've ever moved in your life back to the trailer. And then we flew inside, waited a few minutes, looked out the back window, just the blinds, and, didn't see anything. And then we turned on late night TV and spent the next probably 6 hours or so, at least. I think the sun was coming up by the time we were done talking, trying to figure out what had just happened. We both agreed clearly wasn't either one of us. And we'd never seen anyone before in the woods other than us. It was private property. It was only 12 acres, but there's the neighbors on the one side are 10 acres, and there's a farm on the other side. It's like 500 or 600 acres. It's massive. So we never actually seen another human being ever on the property before other than ourselves. So that would have been unusual to begin with, but this thing was massive. And we kept going back and forth on what it could be. You know, one of the options, of course, was a black bear. And well, black bears only get about 6 feet or so tall. Not to mention, this thing walked. It was upright. It took steps like we would walk. A bear could do that for a few steps, and eventually it would have fallen. You know, and the other thing, too, is a bear, if we were both shooting paintballs at it, one of us would have pissed it off enough where it probably would have come after us. One of us, you know. And it didn't do that either. It also didn't leave the area. Those are the only options I would think. The bear would have either attacked one or both of us, and the bear would have won without question. You know, but it never fell on all fours, and it was so tall, it didn't make sense. And there's no, at that time in Pennsylvania and Ohio, for that matter, even now, were not really any bears around to begin with. And by morning, we reached two conclusions. It was either a 10-foot guy in a gorilla suit, or we just saw a Sasquatch. And, you know, over the years, we kept it to ourselves at first because and he put it best. He said to me just recently, he's like, you know, if you hadn't been there to see it too, I never would have said anything to another person. I said, I feel the exact same way. Because I always wondered, like, you know, is my mind playing tricks on me? And he would say, no, I saw it too. And that was the thing, was every time we talk about it, we both agree we saw it. It stood up, it walked. It was 2-3 feet taller than I am. And, you know, I saw in the comments there was a smell. I don't have a particularly good sense of smell. I can't really smell anything to begin with. So if it did, I would know. As far as I know, PJ didn't smell anything. I mean, to be fair, it was probably early October in Ohio, and we were in T-shirts, so it was probably 70, 80 degrees out, so we were probably sweating. So if it did smell, it might have been us.
No.
You know.
Well, as long as I've done this, I've never smelt one, so I don't know why some people smell them and some people don't.
Well, this is probably the same. Maybe it's the same reason some people can smell asparagus and some people can't.
Yeah.
You know, after you eat asparagus, you know, some people can smell when it exits and some people can't. Apparently, there's an actual genetic reason for that. But perhaps there is some kind of odor that they're giving off, and it's just not every one of us has that particular type of smell, so to speak, to be able to pick up on it. Like, my sense of smell is horrible. It drives my wife crazy. You know, if she'll make something, how does this smell? And I gotta go stick my face in the bowl. You know, let me get a quarter of an inch away and get a deep breath in here, and I'll tell you. Otherwise, I have no idea.
Now, when you said you shot it with a paintball gun, how far away were you? And it didn't do anything at all, except for.
No, these were Walmart paintball guns. The old they're called Talon guns. They were like 35 bucks at Walmart. There were a whole lot of power to them.
Right.
20, probably at least a good solid 20 feet, 25 feet away. I go back and forth when I go out there and look at where it was, but I would imagine somewhere in that neck of the woods. I had to have hit it. There's no way. The thing was huge. And, you know, I mean, PJ, one of us had to hit it. And I've always often wondered, I would have made, you know, that probably made a sound if it hit me. You know what I mean? It would have hurt because we had T-shirts on. So it hurt when it hit. It bruised, but it wasn't terrible. But with this thing having so much fur, and, you know, oftentimes with primates, as I found out over the years of research since then, their skin is oftentimes a lot thicker than ours and denser, harder. So it very well may not have felt it the same way we did, especially from that distance. It may have been nothing more than a mosquito bite, if that, you know. And also, it might have just been trying to hope that neither one of us realized it was there and just simply let us pass by if it was trying to stay hidden. It may not have reacted because it wasn't doing any damage to it. I've often wondered that too, because if it had held completely still, or if PJ had made a sound, I probably would have thought it was somewhere else because my mind wouldn't trust me. You know what I mean? But that didn't happen. more than likely. You know what I mean? So I've always wondered why it didn't react. And sometimes maybe it was just confused. It felt something like it was getting bit by something, like a no-see-um, and then maybe it was just thinking to myself, whatever, it's not hurting me. What are these humans doing? Why are they pointing these weird things at each other? They probably thought we were crazy. So we went out the next day, and I mean, it was like noon, 1 o'clock the next day because we weren't going out without being able to see real far in advance. You know what I'm saying?
And you're 6'8"?
I am 6'8".
Good God, man! And you said this thing was a foot or so taller than you? That's crazy.
It was 2 or 3 feet taller than I was.
Holy!
I think it was closer to 10. My friend PJ believes closer to 9. So we go with the 2 to 3 feet. And the truth is, it was taller. I mean, we were 16, so I don't know if how well our judgment, especially at night, it was definitely taller. In my opinion, it was 3 feet. But to be fair, we were also scared out of our minds because there's this weird thing in the woods, and I'd always been a huge fan of Sasquatch, like I said, from Unsolved Mysteries and all sightings, things like that. But being a fan and believing. And I never expected to see one at my parents' place. You know what I mean? That was the last place I would ever think one would show up. Just because it was, lived there part time, a little bit. So it never occurred to me that one would pass through there. But, and I've wondered about that over the years too. And, we were only, as I said, we were only out there sometimes every other weekend, every third weekend, sometimes 2 months go by. Depending on, I've always been of the belief that they migrate to some degree. And if that's the case, I'm not sure at that time how long it had been since our last visit or even how long our last visit was. And, there's a lot of farmland. There's 2 ponds on their property. The Ohio River is walking distance from where they were. There's plenty of water sources. It actually really was the perfect place for them to be. And it is thick wilderness that's not developed.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yeah, are you getting really bad interference?
Well, I'm hearing you guys perfectly, but the audience is saying that there's some kind of feedback going on.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too, and it's pretty bad.
I'm not even using the mic now. I even shut it off. I put earbuds in.
Yeah, Brian, it might be on your end because it didn't stop when I turned my camera and microphone off. So I don't know.
I don't hear it now. I don't think it's on my end, but
yeah, I don't hear it now either.
I don't hear it at all. I haven't heard anything. It's been perfect, so I'm not really sure.
Oh, it's been pretty bad on my end. I was waiting for somebody else to say something because I thought maybe it was just on my end, but no, it was pretty bad. I mean, I don't hear it now, so whatever was going on, we will continue until it happens again.
I even got up, shut the fans off, just to make sure, but I didn't hear
your mic. Yeah, whatever. You're super loud though, so
okay, I can change that.
Okay, just whisper. Just pss, pss, pss. Anyway, continue on, Brian.
No, I was saying, but yeah, really, with all the water, there was plenty of fruit. There was plenty of farms around. It was dense forest. All the neighbors other than us, we were one of the smallest lots out there. The people across the street were bigger than the other farm. They were 500 plus acres as well, and there was a lot of massive farms. So there wasn't a lot. It's even till this day, it's still a very lightly populated area. And, with there being a pretty much abundance supply of water, it's secluded. In hindsight, it's really the perfect place where they would pass through. I would assume. Like I said, I think they migrate to some degree. Because if you go back to the 90s on the BFRO, you'll look in Ashtabula County, or if you look on the Pennsylvania side, outside of Erie, there was a decent number of sightings over the years from the 70s till now that were reported just to the BFRO. And I put it out on Facebook over the years every now and again in some of the more local groups. Anyone in the 90s ever see this? And I always get a few replies, there's always the "you're crazy, there's no such thing," and then some people say, "Yeah, I saw something," and sometimes I get a couple DMs from people saying that they had an experience around that time. So it does seem like they were in the area at that time. It wasn't just us. There were actually quite a number of other sightings around that time. And it seems like they kind of come in spurts. We had the 70s had their sightings. The 80s had their sightings over several years. So one of my hypotheses, anyways, is that they migrate. And what we encountered was one simply passing through, whether it was using us more as a rest area or they were somewhere multiples in the area. We just happened to see the one. I mean, frankly, for all we know, there could have been other ones out there, and we would have had no idea. Once I saw that first one, another one could have walked up right next to me, and I probably wouldn't have known because I was so focused on that thing. And then I got so scared and took off running. If there had been another one out there, I could have run right by it, and I wouldn't even been the wiser. So
yeah, that interference is bad. Again, I don't know what.
Did it go away?
It's going to be unlistenable at this point. If you can, Brian, I hate to ask you to do this. Can you get out and then come back in again? Have Richard bring you back. Maybe he can do it to both of us and clear this up because people. I mean, I won't listen to a show that sounds like that either. So let's try and fix it real quick and then go from there. Richard, you want to kick us out and bring us back in?
Yeah, that's crazy. Great. All right, guys. Let me know how I sound. Because if not, then I'll just mute myself or whatever because I can't leave because I'm running the board. So somebody let me know how I sound. Give me an idea. Could be me. The two good ones left. Anybody? Oh, okay. Barack says I sound good. All right. So I'm going to bring on Brian and let him do a sound check with you guys. Somebody tell me how he sounds, okay? Thanks, Barack. I appreciate it. Hey, Brian.
How's it going? I'm back. How do I sound?
Well, let's see what the crowd says. So say a few things, Brian.
Sounds good.
All right. They're saying you sound good. Yep, Brax has been on it. He said you sound good. So
excellent.
I don't think it was me, and maybe it was Johnny. Johnny does have some internet issues at his house. So John says we sound great. John Stewart says that we sound great.
Excellent.
So we'll wait for Johnny to come back in. But go ahead and continue where you were at, and because you were talking about there could be multiples, but you would have never noticed because you're so focused on one, and you think they're traveling.
Yeah, I suspect over the years, as I've done research, I suspect that they migrate, and we just happen to. My guess is that they've been through that area before. We probably had not been there in some time, so they probably figured that they were just as surprised to see humans as we were to see it, is my guess. And maybe there, like I said, maybe they very well could have been others around. I never would have known, and I doubt PJ would have either. We were scared out of our minds, this massive creature's there and in the middle of the woods at night. It's an unusual feeling, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, like I said, there could be more around. Somebody brought that up to me not too long ago and said, well, how do you know they weren't watching you? They didn't want you to find them. And I said, I never thought about that. That's a really interesting point. That's very possible because I wouldn't have noticed. They, like I said, they could have been standing right next to me and I would have noticed.
I had to put that up there, Johnny.
Yeah.
We both came, when it was only me, we did a sound check. Everybody said it sounded great. Brought in Brian. He spoke for a minute. Everybody said it sounded great. So give us a 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's see if you sound great.
A 1, 2, 3, 4. How are we doing? Check, test. Test. Test.
They said you're
Everything
doing
good?
good. Yeah, got to give it to
All right.
man. He's giving us a thumbs up on each person that came in. So
Uh, yeah, it's always my fault.
that was John Stewart. You know John, he was on the show.
Yeah, yeah. He used to be on Sasquatch Unredacted for a little while.
we have a
He's
missing
gone now.
episode. We have a missing episode now.
uh, just kidding, John.
When we're dead 20 years from now, they're going to play the lost files of Sasquatch Unredacted. And that's when they're going to find John Stewart's interview.
Oh man, we're just professionals. That's all there is to it. Joe Rogan, look out.
I
Coming
think
after him.
StreamYard. I think a lot of it's StreamYard, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I've got full. I hardly ever get all three Wi-Fi bars, and I got every bit of it. So I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, continue on, Brian, before Richard messed everything up.
No, I was just saying, it's very possible there could be others out there at that time, at that same night. There's definitely reason to believe there was others in the area at that time. There's quite a few other reports. And, I think I was just saying before, we had gone back out there the next day and jumping around here a little bit, but we looked around and didn't see anything. However, we weren't looking for what I would look for today. You know what I mean? I'm not actually sure what we were looking for. I think we were just looking to see if it's going to be standing there somewhere. You know what I mean?
Right.
But today I would have had cameras. I would have strung off the area. I would have had a magnifying glass. I would have put trail cameras up. I would have had plaster ready to go. All sorts of stuff I would have done differently. I would have looked for areas where the branches are snapped off high, higher than I could reach. Things like that we didn't know to look for back then that I probably would have looked for now. So we didn't see any evidence of it the next day. But that's not to say it wasn't out there. We just didn't know what we were seeing or didn't know what we were looking for, and we just missed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we never saw anything like that before or since. That was the only time that happened. And it was, at that point, I was already hooked to begin with. But then once you see it, then it's just endless questions going through my mind,
Oh, that never ends.
Yeah, like what? How is this here? We've been told all the way through biology from fourth grade on that there are no apes or primates in North America, but I'm pretty sure I just saw something standing right there that says otherwise. So, what else is out there? Why are they avoiding us so much? And frankly, if you look at how we treat each other, I would avoid us too.
100%.
I don't blame them for that. That actually is probably the most significant sign of intelligence they possess, is they stay away from us. But it was just a lot of questions. Where do they come from? What are they doing? Why was it out there that night? Was it watching us? Most of the years, I've always just assumed that we stumbled upon it. It never actually occurred to me until somebody mentioned recently, are you sure you found it, or was it there because it had an idea that's where you guys were going to be and it was trying to see what you were doing? Like, I never thought about that, but that's very possible. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe they did see us out in the woods, and since no one had been around for a while, they got curious, and then there were other ones blending in, and that we just happened to see that one, and there could have been other ones around. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Richard,
an interesting.
you hearing the feedback again?
No.
I am.
No.
I am.
That's pretty bad. Do either one of y'all have a TV on? You said you got a fan on, right, Richard?
Yeah, I put it on low. It's one of those little fans about this big.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like when you put electronics too close together, almost, and then you start getting feedback. But I don't know, man. That's going to be rough if we can't get it fixed. Because almost every time he talks, Getting
Because on
feedback.
my end, it's been a perfect night. You guys sound great. Everything sounds great on my end. You guys sound awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It might not show up in the playback. I don't know. The
Did,
people in the chat room said they don't hear anything. They says it sounds good.
but they did before though, right?
They did before, but they said we
All
fixed
right.
it. When you guys left and came back, they said it sounds great. You know. Oh, wait a minute. John Stewart says there's more back feed. I don't
Yeah.
know what's causing it, unless yeah. Wayne says it's infrasound. He
Yeah.
says it faintly comes and goes. So I wonder if on anywhere where you guys are at, or if there's something in the area that's going on that's causing that interference. You know what I
I
mean?
don't know. There's no electronics near me at all, so I really don't know what it could be.
Derrick said it's in
I have,
and out. It comes and goes.
Yeah.
I
So
have full bars for my Wi-Fi. I'm only maybe 20 feet from the router. I'm not that far.
Right. I'm the same here. So I don't know, fellas. I just say continue on, and then if we have to, we'll do it again later on and start all over again. History, StreamYard for what it is, we've had a lot of problems out of StreamYard.
yeah,
So I just don't know. I don't know if there's a better platform what we can get because there's no reason with all of us having full signal uh, and full bar. I just don't know. I don't know why it would be doing that. And we just pay too much money for it to be doing stuff like that. It's not doing what it's designed to do. So
yeah.
we might have to shop around there, StreamYard, if you don't fix your
You got
stuff.
that right. What we can try to do is when Brian's talking, we'll just mute, see if that helps.
Yeah.
And then if we have a question, we'll just pop in with a question.
All right.
That's
Well,
right.
let's continue on and fingers crossed. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off my microphone and my camera.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brian.
All right. But I was trying to think about where I left off. I think something around the sightings in the area and things like that. My personal hypothesis is that they migrate around. I suspect there's cycles. I think that's part of the reason that they don't leave a trace is because they don't exhaust any food supply in one area. It seems like the sightings jump around. Taking Ohio, for example, we had out by Canton, there was a rash of sightings. And then over closer to Pennsylvania, on the other side of the state, there was a rash of sightings. And, we have a lot more now in the southern portion of the state. And that's mostly because this part of the state has been built up a lot over the last 30, 40 years. So it makes sense that they would be pushed. We have, I think you and I talked about it, Salt Fork State Park here, where it's one of the largest amounts of sightings in the country takes place here. And it's a massive park. It's huge. And there's also Hocking Hills State Park. There is Wayne National Forest down there. And everything in that area by Lower City, it's all, farmland, woods, things like that. So it's once you combine Wayne National Forest and you're into the hundreds of thousands of acres that who knows the last time a human being has actually been through one end to the other, all the way through the middle. You know what I mean? There's lakes back there in the national forest and things like that. So there's certainly plenty of places for them to hide. The southern part of the state, we also border West Virginia. So you have the Appalachians right there, the foothills of the Appalachians start in Ohio. So it does seem like, but even down there, some years around Hocking Hills, you see a lot of sightings. Other years, you see more at Salt Fork. Salt Fork, for whatever reason, seems to have a continual stream of sightings. It is a massive park. You can start at one end, driving through the other, going about 55, 60. It'll take you a good half an hour or so. And then there's woods on both sides that go back for miles and miles. And then it also connects to other state-owned land and things like that. So it's endless down there. So I don't know. My suspicion is that over the years, the sightings, for example, where I am now, Lorain County, we have very few sightings. Years ago, there was not always the case, but Lorain County, up until about 2000, was much more rural. And over the last 25 years, it's exploded everywhere with developments. So it makes sense to me why you would not see as many now as you did before. And there's different local urban legends out here about where people used to see them all often, things like that. But like I said, to me, it just seems like they're migrating. My guess is that the winter does not affect them the same way it affects us. I don't necessarily think they're migrating because of the weather in the way that we might do so. I think they're migrating to keep their anonymity, if you will. When you look at Wayne National Forest, Hocking Hills, and Salt Fork State Park, over a course of several years, there's plenty of areas for them to rotate through where they could make nests. Then they could then destroy those nests if they wanted to. They could easily disappear into the water. The wilderness is thick. There's no street lights. It's not necessarily a national quiet zone, but there you pretty much don't get any cell phone service in a lot of that area. So there's just no human presence around. So it makes sense that that's where people would see them, because there's still people. It's just not at the level it is now in other parts. So I think that's potentially why they're migrating that way. I don't think they go into West Virginia or Ohio from West Virginia because of the weather. I think it's more of a feeding ground. I also think they don't want to leave too much of a trace. Otherwise, we would end up finding if they were, colonizing an area permanently. I think they're constantly on the move, and that's one of the reasons they have remained so elusive.
I'm a big believer that they do move. Now, I don't ever use the term migrate because to me, migrate seems like great distances. You know what I mean? And but I do believe they go to other parcels within, I don't know, let's say a 50-mile radius or a 100-mile radius. I don't know, but they do travel, like following game, following food sources, different things like that. So I absolutely agree that there's definitely some movement.
Yeah, I have to agree with both of y'all on that one. It's I get activity about 4 months out of the year, and it's been consistent for 7 years. So they've got to be what I think they're doing. I don't know this 100%. There's no way to track that. But if you imagine a big circle and then a bunch of little circles on the outer edge of that big circle, I imagine they probably go from spot. They'll leave one area, go to another, and then move around in that area, and then go around the big circle again, and then move around that area. Because, like you're saying, the only way, if you're any type of animal, especially something big like that, you can't stay in one area for very long at all before you start leaving sign. And you're, like you said about the food resources and tracks and everything else, they have to move. I think it pretty much, that's what is keeping them alive, is that constant cycle of moving. But it is, like I said, what I've noticed over the years is it's pretty consistent, like within like 3 or 4 weeks. Like I can almost guarantee they'll be back in September, and then they'll leave maybe November-ish, and then they come back again in spring. So it's pretty consistent.
I suspect, it's just my personal hypothesis, but that they follow the crop patterns. They know what blooms when, what's edible when, just like we do. I think that's part of it. But I agree with you. I like your analysis with a circle and a lot of smaller circles, because I agree with that too. I think they go to different areas in the same season. They kind of spread out, and they don't pick necessarily one area dry. That way they can go back, or they can spread out, or if one area gets discovered by us, for example, then they can simply go back to another feeding ground and another feeding ground without completely depleting their resources.
Yeah.
It does seem like they have some kind of habit or some kind of pattern to it. And, I'm going off the basis that there's some kind of an offshoot of a primate species, and typically they're not carnivores. Sometimes they eat both, but a lot of times they are, mostly eat plants, fruits, things like that. You'd always hear stories about deer being snapped or things like that. And it's possible, I'm not saying they don't, if something's hungry enough, they'll eat anything, truth be told. But, I think I agree. I think there's some kind of a pattern to the area that they're in, and then they move to another area. And I think that's a pattern too. And I think that continues through. And the other thing too is I suspect, just like wolves inherently know they have to mate with other packs. There's no communication. They instinctively know that. And part of it, I wonder, is it a part of this mating ritual, why they're moving around so much? Their population is probably very low to begin with. So genetic diversity is imperative. And, we don't know for sure what the level of intelligence is. I suspect they're very intelligent. I don't know how smart they are, but I suspect they're very intelligent. And they're capable of learning, they're capable of adapting, but I also suspect they're very animal-like. And I think their instincts, they could be running on instinct, at least to some degree as well. But part of the reason that they move around...
Probably top behavior too. You know what I mean? As they grow up, the adults are taking these pathways and showing it to them, and they learn those pathways, just like they learn what to eat, what not to eat. It's a learned behavior from the adults.
Yeah, very well. And that would make sense too, as far as the genetic diversity goes, because if the packs have always been, and I don't know if they're packs or clans or clusters, groups, whatever you want to call them, but just for conversation purposes, if these packs are interacting with each other every so often, I suspect that might be part of it. And that's also, like you said, that very well could be part of the ritual too, that they simply meet at certain times of year or every other year. And that's how they, keep genetic diversity in their population to some degree, at least. Otherwise they would die out. There's no other, I don't see how else they could do it. They have to be spread out at least enough. But at the same time, I don't think that one would necessarily survive on its own from society. There could be a couple lone wolves out there that are Sasquatches that don't particularly live among the others, but I suspect they're not that far apart from them either. Because, if you're in Alaska, that's probably fine. But if you're in Ohio, that's probably not. There's a very likely chance that something could happen, or somebody could see them, or they could get cornered. Whereas if they're with a group, there is safety in numbers. And we could go back to Ape Canyon, and would be my example to that is they wanted something. They were protecting their own. They didn't want to hurt us, the people, the miners. They could have hurt them if they wanted to. If you ever look at the picture and see what they did inside of that cabin, they very easily could have ripped that door down and gotten in there. I don't think they want, I don't think they're aggressive naturally.
No, I agree, because I've read that story, I've researched that story, and it was a sturdy structure, but it wasn't a strong structure. And when you hear stories about this thing being so strong, it could rip a door off a car, well, they'd have no problem with that building that they were sleeping in. They'd have no issues with it, especially as many that were supposed to be there attacking them. See what I'm saying? But
yeah,
they didn't kill them. You know what I mean? And it goes with one of my theories, because you do have some people that say, don't go in the woods, those things will kill you and this and that. And I just, the reports just don't add up to that at all. The reports actually say the opposite. Like your sighting or anybody else's sighting, it's always passive. It's always just a moment, and it moves on. You move on. Even with hunters and hikers and people driving a car or whatever, it's always been passive.
So, Brian, let me ask you this. You don't think there's any paranormal aspect to it at all, or spiritual or anything like that?
My personal opinion is that they are biological. That said, just because I think that doesn't mean I'm right.
Right.
There very well could be a supernatural or a paranormal, however you want to word it, aspect to this. They could very well be both. On the other hand, my personal opinion of the supernatural is it's not magic or anything else. It's simply a level of science we don't quite understand yet. I don't actually think we know the right questions to even ask to begin to understand it. I think we're getting to a point technologically where we're starting to discover maybe questions to ask, and we're starting to realize there's something out there. I don't think we're at the point where we can actually assign words to it. I don't think the words in our language necessarily exist to perhaps describe what we're the paranormal aspect of it, or the level of science behind, for say, a portal. You know, let's operate on the assumption that that is exactly what's happening. You know, as I think one of you guys mentioned earlier about Sasquatch originating from the First Nations people in Canada. That same tribe also talks about Sasquatch as being spiritual guardians. They used to once live in harmony with them. Some point centuries ago, roughly around the time when European settlers first arrived, the Europeans were retrofitting to land to fit their needs and not living with the land. And the Sasquatches didn't like that. And the people described them as a guardian, another kind of human, a wild man, if you will, which is essentially the term of what Sasquatch means. And they talk about living side by side and communicating and sharing information at one point, and then they all disappeared because they didn't want anything to do with the Europeans. Frankly, probably a wise decision. Otherwise, we probably would have killed them off by now. You know, certainly not for lack of trying. But they talk about there's a particular rock face on their land that is supposedly a dimensional or some kind of. They don't use the word dimension; they call it a portal to another world, and that's where they believe the Sasquatches go. It's some kind of a spiritual plane. Now, could portals exist? I'm sure it's absolutely possible. I do not believe a Sasquatch is creating them. That's just my personal opinion. I could be completely wrong. Like I said, I don't think they're doing anything unusual. There's no evidence they use technology. There's no evidence that they are extraterrestrial or anything like that, as far as I've ever come across. I do think it is uncanny how they disappear, how they seem to come and go. I think there's explanations for that. You know, some owls, for example, blend in the trees. They can change the color of their their feathers, their shade to blend in the trees. For all we know, a Sasquatch is very capable, has a similar ability that they have evolved with out of necessity. I think they are native to the wilderness and we are visitors. I think they've forgotten more about any patch of woods than we'll probably ever realize because they live there in the woods, out in the open. So, and I think they know how to blend in. I think they know how to not hold still. I think they know how not to make noise. And if they do have some ability to biologically alter their appearance, whether that be changing color even, I don't know. You know, human eyesight is actually quite terrible. We don't really see much of what is in the world. Perhaps they are able to alter the shade or their color, if you will, to something that's more difficult for our eyes to see. It allows them to blend in, you know, and where it looks like they go into a rock face and all of a sudden they vanish, perhaps they didn't vanish. They simply blended in a way that we're incapable of understanding at this time. You know, and you also have to look at what linguistically was available to them to describe an incident. If somebody walked into the woods and they saw a flash of light and there was this big hairy creature and then it was gone, portal is probably the closest word available to translate into English at that time to repeat the story. That doesn't mean it's an accurate description. That's the only thing they could think of to call it. You know, for all we know, lightning could have struck that rock face. And you went like this when the lightning hit, and the Sasquatch very quickly dove off to the side and played dead. And your hyper focus on it was there a second ago. Now it's gone. You saw lightning. It must be magic. I'm not saying that's the case. I don't know. Maybe it is a portal, and maybe there is some paranormal explanation behind it we haven't scraped the surface of yet. I'm simply saying I think there's alternative explanations. I think they used language available to them at that time to describe what they saw. I'm just not completely sure we understand what they were describing. And that's only one possibility. You know, maybe they did go through a dimensional portal. Maybe something else created that portal. Just to veer off you're off in left field a little bit. There's ancient origin theories, things like that. There's UFO researchers. I dip my hand in kind of everything, so I follow those angles too. And UFOs have the technology. They move at incredible speeds. They come and go. They vanish. Could there be some kind of portal system existing on Earth that they created? Could there be some kind of natural portal system that the Sasquatches simply remember how to use and we don't? If you look back at ancient cultures, allegedly we could do all sorts of stuff. We somehow used to live for centuries in some cultures. We would get from one point in the world to another. We have always assumed that those were all stories, but what if they weren't? What if there is something out there, and as a species, we simply have forgotten? Or we never knew it to begin with, and somehow they figured it out, and they're simply using what naturally exists or what was artificially created to navigate. I personally suspect more likely there was probably some kind of cave system, or cave systems would perhaps be a better description, not just in Canada, but I know in Ohio we have a lot of caves, especially southern Ohio. There's dozens of different cave systems. Kentucky, Pennsylvania, this whole area, there's a lot of sightings, also a lot of cave systems. Generally a cave will roughly be 55 degrees pretty much all the time. So if you needed to get away and you wanted somewhere safe that you're not going to be found, it's certainly a great choice. And if they're aware of a cave system that we are not, or they have access to one, and it's not something we would be able to access because of their size, their strength, their speed, maybe there's something that they climb in, maybe they climb down something that we just would never notice or think to even do, I don't know. I think those are all possibilities. But I believe in the paranormal. I think there are things out there that fall into the realm of paranormal. I just don't think this particular cryptid is one of them.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that happen, in the woods. I've seen some strange things, and Johnny's definitely experienced some strangeness in years past. But where I draw the line is that I can't bridge the two together. See what I'm saying? That's where I have the issue is, like an orb, for example. Somebody will say, well, they turn into an orb and float away, or, they come out of an orb or whatever. I've heard those stories, and I'm like, there's been no documented proof of that. But if I see an orb, I see an orb. 30 minutes later, I see a Bigfoot. But what bridges those two together? See what I'm saying? It's like I saw a rabbit, and now I see, a half an hour later, I see a fox. Are they related? Is there something going on between the two? See what I'm saying? There's nothing to bridge the two together.
Yeah, but here's the other thing, too. Two things can be true. Somebody could see orbs and also see a Sasquatch completely unrelated. I don't doubt what people are seeing. Enough people are seeing it. I just personally don't think they're related. I think there's two different phenomena going on.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Right.
And I say the same thing with the UFOs, and I think, Richard, you and I talked about this on Wednesday. In Ohio, we also have a decent share of UFO sightings, typically around Lake Erie, which is not unusual for a lot of bodies of water. However, assuming UFOs are here, they're watching us. Let's just say for a second the orbs are something from them. Perhaps they're observing us. Perhaps they're observing Sasquatches. Perhaps they're observing both. And they're not connected at all. One has absolutely nothing to do with the other. They simply both exist. The other thing, too, is with the correlation I've heard recently that people keep telling me is that Sasquatches are often seen by water, too. I said, okay, well, let's break it down. Any biological being that's like any mammal on Earth needs a certain amount of water. You have no choice. You'll die. If something is coming to our planet, and I'm just taking a liberty and assuming that they can either survive in our atmosphere or they have some way to adapt to survive or equipment, but either way, as far as we know, every life form on this planet needs water to survive. And that seems to be a universal with our planet understanding. So what's to say that that's not the case from whatever's coming here, and it's simply Sure, maybe they are UFOs. Maybe they do exist. They may just need water just as much as we do. And the same thing with a Bigfoot. They probably simply just need water, you know, or they're catching fish or they're bathing. I don't know if they do bathe. I would imagine some kind of, I don't know. But my guess is that's people are seeing these and they're saying, oh, well, there was 60 miles. There was a Bigfoot sighting. Okay. But then, you know what I'm saying? I understand why they're trying to draw the correlation. I'm just saying two things can be true and not connected. There can be UFO sightings. There can be Bigfoot sightings. They can be at the same time, but not necessarily connected. And again, don't take my word for it. I could be completely wrong. This is a theory. There's certainly evidence to back both theories, but I personally fall on this side of the answer. But that doesn't mean the other side's not correct and they are connected. I have no idea. Like I said, I think it's just something very simple that we all need water. So of course we're all going to be around sources of water. We don't have a choice,
Yeah.
Well, I definitely make it a priority. Right.
Like when you're talking about the migration pattern, there's things that these creatures do that don't make sense for a creature that's spiritual or supernatural or whatever. If you're supernatural and you have portals or all these other things, it's just like having a migration pattern for food or whatever reason. It just doesn't work for me. I don't know why. And I'm right there with you. If I've experienced some very, very profound spiritual events, and so I know that side of reality exists. And I've seen the Sasquatch. I've 7 years of doing this. But just because two things are in the same area doesn't mean those two phenomenon are connected at all. We just don't understand either one of them enough to even know. Now, if you see an orb appear and then a Sasquatch comes out of it, then you got bingo. Then you could say 100%, this thing's either supernatural, paranormal, or, whatever you want to say. But the longer I do this, the more, because I started out actually leaning more towards the spiritual side because I had the spiritual events happen first. So when the Sasquatch stuff started, I kind of jumped to that conclusion when I didn't know what I was dealing with yet. I just I thought maybe they were connected. But the longer I've done this, like with them disappearing, well, one thing that people don't put into account is the fact that I believe, and we've seen it, these things go down to all fours or belly crawling or doing the spider crawl. You've got something that's almost 7 feet tall and then it goes behind a tree and then you get around there and it's gone. Well, these things can drop down on all fours or get extremely low and then, crawl off. So now it looks like the thing's disappeared. Kind of like you were saying with the flash of lightning or whatever with the Native Americans in the boulder. Any of the number of things could be happening. I've just never understood why, out of all the things on the planet and all the animals, why is it that people think Sasquatch are supernatural or whatever? When it's not. If we had 15 different animals that had these different powers and traits and everything else, then I would understand that. But why have we chosen this one creature and then given it powers? But again, like you, I could definitely be wrong, but I just not seen it. The longer I do this, the more I can find rational explanation for things that happen. But
well, even the powers, is it a power or is it simply a genetic quality, a trait that they have that allows them to do something we can't?
right.
You know what I mean? Is it something completely biological that they don't even think about? Because remember, we're half a chromosome apart from a chimp, or a chromosome apart from a chimp. Is it even a full one? I don't remember anymore. Think how little that is, but how much of a difference that is.
No,
And these things are clearly much different than us, but they're not like any other primate species that we're aware of either. So who knows what's in their genetic makeup, why it's in there, how it came to be. We're looking at them and we're saying they act a certain way. But we're also assuming that, we're talking about, we would think of food, we would think of water, we would think of genetic diversity. These are all things we would think of. Frankly, there's no reason to assume that they think anything like us. And that might be part of the reason why they don't communicate with us, is because they think so differently than we do. It's like cats and dogs. It's a completely different approach to existence. And that their behavior may have a reason behind it. It just may be nothing that we've named, because it's something that we probably would never think of in a million years, because we're not wired to think in the way that they are. Like I said, if they're a chromosome different than us in a chimp, who knows what that chromosome could do? Could that give them other attributes of animals? Maybe. Why can humans smell rain 50 miles away? You go outside, you can say, "Oh, I think it's going to rain." That's generally a uniquely human quality. Well, why did that happen? Where did that come from? And how long have we had it, and do we still need it? Generally speaking, for the most part, water isn't an issue for us at this point as a species. But we can still do it, right? It hasn't grown out of us. We haven't shed that trait. So who knows what their evolution has led to for them to survive, for them to develop. They very well could have developed something that's unfathomed to us that allows them to disappear. And you hear people talk about mind speak. I don't know. I question that. But again, you're talking about a massive genetic difference between us and this species. Anything could be possible, because the truth is we don't know enough about their genetics to really say what could be rolled in or out. When people say they hear it in their language, in English, it's somehow it's connecting to our mind and they're hearing a voice and it's communicating. Because I've talked to people before, and there's always different answers. And I was always, well, what was it like when it communicated? I would say, I never asked what it said. I asked how it communicates. Because some people will say it was a feeling, there were images, there were words, it was a combination. Some people say it was all words, like they're having a conversation. Some people say it was mostly like an emotional experience. They felt something. And they just had an understanding. They can't explain it, but somehow they knew it had touched their mind somehow. I have no idea. Maybe that is possible. You know what I mean?
Well,
like I said, well, what can a chromosome difference do to something like that as opposed to us? And people have always realized that humans have had or have capabilities. We have psychics and things out there. People are certainly better than the average guesser. So there's evidence to support that kind of phenomenon could exist, right? Maybe. Don't know.
Right.
I don't think it's a magical thing. I don't think it's a power, so to speak. I think it's a genetic trait that was dominant in their species development for whatever reason, perhaps not in ours for a different reason.
Yeah, it's especially like the mind speak thing is. I had my own opinion on it, and I've discussed it many times on other shows. But I think if they had that ability, that way of doing that, I would think it would just be interspecies, where that's where they can communicate with each other. But then I'll get something that contradicts that thought. You know what I mean? For example, I'll give a prime example is the Sierra sounds. Okay. You listen to the whole tape, the whole vocalizations, and they say there's communication and they say there's different things going on. Why didn't they just mind speak to each other? Why didn't they just, and nobody would have known they're there? See what I'm saying? everything, each side keeps contradicting themselves. You know what I mean? So it makes it a very confusing topic. And I think that's what draws a lot of us into it, is because we're inquiring minds and we want to get out there. We want to find the answers. We want to search, and we want to, accumulate as much evidence as we can. You know what I mean? And really the only evidence that we have is forensic. You know what I mean? We have some great encounters, that people say, I saw this or I saw that, but it's really, if you're going to prove something, it has to be measurable. It has to be seen. It has to be felt. It has to be touched. It has to be recorded. It has to be videotaped. There has to be some kind of forensic evidence to prove it. You can't just go by a story or a feeling. See what I'm saying? And
I agree.
and I think that's what I know. It motivates me. It motivates me. And I put trail cams out. People say, "Why are you wasting your time? Trail cams don't work." But see, there's another contradiction. There's a famous photo of this old man that had the apple orchard. He had the camera up in the tree because something was eating his apples, and he caught what looks to be a possible female Sasquatch with an infant under its arm, picking up apples on the ground. He caught images of it. It's that famous image where it looks like it has blotches of hair missing and stuff, like it might have some kind of a skin disease or something. But very, very interesting photo. And it absolutely looks like a Sasquatch bent over, holding a baby, picking up apples. And it's legitimate because shortly before that, on the camera was a fox had come through underneath the tree as well. So I think it can be caught by trail cam. I really do. I think it's tricking them. I think it's finding a way to do it. Um, I think one of the major issues, they say the red light, but I also think we tend to leave too much odor. When we touch things and stuff, they smell it. They know, okay, there's been another creature here. Their noses, if they live in the wild, they got a great sense of smell. If you live in the wild, they got a great sense of hearing. If they live in the wild, they got great eyesight. You know what I mean? They have a lot. We lose all that because we're in a concrete jungle. You know what I mean? And we don't use those senses. Like if we lived in the Wild West and we spent a lot of time out on the range. I tell people all the time, your first hour in the woods is wasted. The first hour, just hike, just get to where you need to go. Because after that first hour, you start smelling things different. You start hearing things different. You start seeing things different because you're acclimating to the wild, to the wilderness. You know what I mean? And you're getting all that damage from being in the city or being at work and all that out of your system. And now you're in a peace and quiet. You can focus on all these things. So I think they can. I think trail cams can work. I think drones can work. I think thermal can work. But I don't think any of them is the tell-all. I think they're all tools that need to come together. You have to have it all. You can't just rely on one thing.
Well, they better work because we sure
Well,
as
yeah,
heck
and
have
here's
spent a
the
lot of
thing
money
too
on it.
is I don't
You're
disagree
right,
with
Johnny.
mind speak. I just don't put a lot of effort and time to it because it's something that can't be repeated. Scientifically speaking, the only way we're ever going to prove the existence of this thing is if we can find something that we can document and then repeat it.
Have you
with trail
seen those?
cams, drones, we can constantly go out there.
Have you seen the telepathy tapes?
I
have
haven't.
not seen the
I've heard of.
telepathy tapes.
I've heard of them, but I haven't seen them.
Didn't we talk about this on the podcast with somebody?
Yes, with Brian King, Frank King Sharp.
Yeah, that it wasn't our podcast, it was his podcast. But listen to it's if you have not seen the telepathy tapes, they're very, very interesting. Go on YouTube and look it up. But it's basically autistic children. They have proven that autistic children can basically mind speak with their parents, and they have one particular scientist, doctor, that has set up experiments, and they're doing like double blind, basically they've done a bunch of different things, but they'll have the mother and put the mother in another room, and then she'll look at a picture of an apple, and then the kid in the other room will pick the apple, and their accuracy is like in the 90s, which is insane, you know. So that's the. I mean, we're pretty much on the same page. Just because I haven't, you know, I'm open to whatever it is. I want the answers no matter where it leads me. You know, I think there's a good possibility that, you know, maybe there's a lot of things that we don't know. And I completely disregarded the whole mind speak thing. And like one of the biggest shocks to me was watching Les Stroud when he did his Bigfoot show. And to have him go into talking about mind speak. And I'm like, what? What is Les Stroud doing talking about mind speak? That's ridiculous. And but when I started watching the telepathy tapes, it was like, man, that's actually, if humans can do that, you know, who knows? Maybe it's real.
Well, it's the same thing when you bring up the telepathy tapes. You know, Christopher Noel, he wrote a book on the characteristics of autism and Bigfoot, how they share some characteristics. Maybe MindSpeak is one of them. I don't know. He didn't get into the MindSpeak portion of it, but it's kind of funny. He brings up autism in Bigfoot, and you know, now people are thinking, you know, there might be something there. Um, I'm the same way. If it happens to me, then I'll pay attention to it, you know. But until then, I just keep going in the same direction I'm going and doing what I'm doing until, you know. And I'm like you, Brian. I'm out there by myself. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. You know, because I'm out there by myself. You know.
Well, and that's personally why I don't spend a lot of effort on it for two reasons. One, since I am out there by myself, there's no one to corroborate that I'm not, you know, didn't get dehydrated or something accidentally, or I'm not hallucinating for some reason because there's a gas leak in the air. I don't know. Or my mind isn't playing tricks on me, or I didn't dream. You know what I mean? In the back of my
Right.
mind, if I'm by myself and that were to happen, I would never believe it. I would just assume that there's something else wrong. I'd probably never say anything to anybody. Now, if somebody's there with me and they said, I heard this voice in my head too, then we also have a collaborating statement. But the other problem I have with MindSpeak is even if, you know, say there's 10 of us out there and we hear MindSpeak, how do we recreate that environment? How do we get 10 different people to that same spot to hear something?
Right.
And are we hearing it because we're in a certain spot and they're in a certain spot? Are we hearing it because they're in a certain distance? There's so many different factors that could go into it. I don't see how, with how little we know, that we can attempt to recreate a MindSpeak. So I don't see it leading towards discovery. I think it's interesting because it's certainly a part of who and what they are. And as far as why they wouldn't use MindSpeak to communicate with each other instead of tree knock, or how sometimes we're applying human logic to something that may think completely nothing like us. They have no clue how we approach things. And in their minds, there could be operating some kind of logic that is incomprehensible to us. Not saying it's good, bad, or different. I'm just saying it is different. It's not the same. So,
Right.
you know, measuring them on that standard as far as how they communicate. Are they capable of understanding humans? Maybe. Gorillas can learn sign language. You know, chimps can learn sign language. I mean,
Well, that's what I'm hoping, because when I see one, if it walks out in front of me, the first thing I'm doing is stop. So I'm hoping he does understand. I'm really hoping he understands. You know.
But animals in general understand sign language. When an animal behaves a certain way, you know, if you put your head down, if you act aggressive, or if you act submissive, animals understand that. And depending on how you're looking at this, just because it has animal instincts doesn't mean it's not very intelligent. And you know, you and I had talked about this, I think, on Wednesday, is how we quantify intelligence is not necessarily accurate. I think the example we talked about was if you drop a human being in the Congo, they're probably going to be dead in about 12 hours. Well, what would happen if you dropped a gorilla in New York City? Probably the same result. More likely we'd trank it with something, whereas in the Congo we'd get killed or eaten or both. But if you drop a gorilla in the Congo, it'll thrive. Just like if you drop a human in New York City, it will thrive, because those are our environments. It may be very intelligent and in its environment, which its environment is the woods. Our environment is the concrete jungle, our cities, our houses, our developments.
Right.
So why it's doing what it's doing and how it's acting, it may be operating on a completely different level of intelligence as far as how to maneuver in the forest, how to disappear. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're very, very good at it. And perhaps part of that is simply distracting us. People say, well, then why? I've heard that argument before with the mind speak. I go, well, maybe the howl or the tree knocking was for our benefit.
Right.
And, one of them far away knows that one of them is close to us. And if they start smacking on a tree or howling, for all we know, they don't have the ability to speak verbal language like we do. This as far as the sounds, being able to form words. Who knows what their biology is? Can they actually, Could they actually form a sentence to talk? They might be able to think about it, but can they actually make the noise? So if they can't, they have to get our attention somehow. And over the year, they probably have realized, like any animal, will respond to noise. So if they are trying to draw our attention long enough for one of their own to slide by, howling, smacking at a tree, throwing rocks, all these things would do that. And it goes again, like I said, why didn't they mind speak? Because they didn't need to mind speak. That wasn't we're looking at it from our perspective. If they're trying to avoid us, for all we know, their perspective is there's two that we don't see, and that's who they're trying to get out. Everything else is just the stage, is a distraction. And it's their environment.
I think that's
what they're doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's what we had a past guest, me and Harley Owens were talking about that, and about you have to define certain things. And when we talk about their intelligence, and like you said, we have to define intelligence. If they have been around longer than humans, then there's been no evolution progress with them. They're not using complex tools, for example. They're not utilizing fire or something like that but we did. I mean, we evolved, and we got smarter. We got, more complicated and stuff like that. But put them in their environment, they're a genius. But so is a bear, so is a cougar, so is a fox. They're very good in those areas. So they're all smart. See what I'm saying? They're all smart. A prime example was, before I had my encounter in 2005, I was an avid hunter. One of the things I really enjoyed to do when it wasn't deer season was squirrel hunting. And I would see a squirrel in a tree. There's not a tree within 20 feet around it. It's in that tree. I saw it in the tree, and I can't find it. I circled the tree and circled the tree, and I can't find it. He outsmarted me. See what I'm saying? And that's just a little squirrel. So, but again, if the squirrel is in my yard and there's no trees, I got him dead to rights. I know my territory. It's the same if somebody breaks into my house. I got the upper hand because I know this house better than they do. I know where to hide. I know where to be. So I'll get the jump on the burglar. See what I'm saying? So I think we'd have to sit back and really define intelligence. See what I'm saying? And determine, we have to break it down. If some people want to go as far as breaking down species, well, let's break down intelligence as well, and what is intelligence and how intelligent is it,
Absolutely. And I mean, here's the thing. I can drive a car, automatic, stick, you got it. I can drive it. What I cannot do is build an engine. Change a tire. I could put some washer fluid in, probably figure out how to change the oil, but I couldn't change the transmission. I know how it works. I can drive the vehicle, but you know what I'm saying? So
right.
we like to think of ourselves as very intelligent, but we know how to operate things that other people have made. But you know what I'm saying? How much do we really know? How much are we really capable of doing on our own? Did we build a car from scratch, make the metal, forged it out of nothing? You know what I'm saying? So if they're just as intelligent as we are, but they're applying that same intelligence to the woods, they're very, very capable of outsmarting us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The same reason
That's
that
why
if they walk in,
they outsmart us every time we're out there. That's why we haven't caught them. They outsmart us every time.
well, yeah, it's the same thing. If situations were reversed and all of a sudden there's more of them than us, and they were looking for us in a city, and I know I can get in a car like a Tesla, for example. I know it doesn't make any noise. I could get on it, get inside, tell it to reverse itself, and it'll drive me out of there, and they'll be none the wiser. You know, but it doesn't mean I could build a Tesla. I just understand how it works. And that goes, and I'm kind of circling back to the disappearance of the portals too. As I said, I do not believe that they create portals. I'm not saying they're not using them. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm simply saying they probably, if they do exist, and that is part of how they work, they're just simply working with what they have. You know what I mean? The same way that we would do it. And if they have certain genetic advantages that we do not have, if they have learned their camouflage, it's the same thing. They know they have it, we don't. So we're judging their actions based on assuming that they're just like us, that they can't alter their state to where they're not seen. I'm not saying alter like in a shifting into another frequency or anything like that. I'm simply saying change their shade to match tree bark better. Or if there's a lot of leaves on the ground and they see a tree falling down, they just can run over and lay down in there and kind of adjust to blend in much better that our eyes would not pick up, because we're also not looking for it either. You know,
Right.
have you ever worked at a company where they play those videos? There was one company I used to work for. Every couple of years, they make us watch it, and it's a bunch of people throwing these big red balls. They bounce all over the place, and they say, count how many balls are going and focus on the balls and focus, focus, focus. And a guy in a gorilla suit walks out and goes like this.
Right. Yeah, I saw that.
Nobody sees it, right? Because we're all paying attention to the balls bouncing around. The same thing to a Sasquatch. We see something, it's a surprise, it's frightening. We hyper focus in on a specific area, a specific thing. We saw it by that tree. That's where it is. It has to be there. You look away from it. It couldn't have gone that far. That's where it was. Because we have no concept of how quick they are. They could be incredibly fast. We have no idea. And the other thing, too, is if it goes 20 feet away, it lays down, then and it can blend in just even a little bit. We're going to look around and we're going to have adrenaline pumping, and we're going to have all sorts of potentially emotions. You're going to have overwhelming either fear, curiosity, simply disturbed, all these different things that will throw your focus off. And we know from psychological research on human beings, that video is the example, that if we focus on something too hard, something could walk right in front of us and we wouldn't even know it. So perhaps that is also part of how they're disappearing. It's simply that they understand that that's the effect. When we see one of them, they understand how we react. And from their particular standard, maybe they think our vision isn't that good, or they've noticed that our senses are not that good. They've noticed that if they come upon us, that typically they find us quicker than we would notice them. And frankly,
because
by them all the time.
Right. I've made that point, and I did it one time. It's been a long time ago. It's in one of my past videos where I'm on this trail and I'm looking at this pine, this saplings. There's a whole bunch of saplings, pine saplings, and I just happened to look at the saplings. I just happened to look in there, and I never saw this deer until its ear moved. All of a sudden, it flicked its ear, and I could see it clear as day. So I took a photograph of the deer, and I posted the photograph of the deer. People are like, "I don't see a deer. You're just clickbaiting me, trying to make me," and it's not. So I circled the deer, and then they're like, "There it is, right? It's right there." That's just a deer. And if it had not flicked its ear, I would have never known. I would have walked right on by and went about my day and never known he was there. See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
My
so
thing is,
we're looking.
I
Okay.
wish if there is mind speak, I wish that when I enter the woods, that they would mind speak and understand that I'm not out. I'm not a threat to them in any way, shape, or form at all. Not even close. You know what I mean? And if they can mind speak and read that in my mind that hey, this guy is out here, he's just trying to find us, but he means us no harm, then you would think they would come out and say, hey, I'm Bigfoot. Here's your 10 seconds. You know what I mean? Because that's all I want is 10 seconds.
See, I actually I think just the opposite. I think if it looked into one of, especially you and me, if it looked into our minds and said these guys have been searching me forever, as soon as they get back to the rest of these idiots, they're going to tell everybody we're out here, and every human from here to however they measure geography is going to be coming in here looking for us, and we may not be able to get out of here fast enough and erase every trace, because
Well, I mean,
that's I'm saying from
we can
their
have that.
perspective. You know what I mean? We're a
Well,
threat to them from their perspective. Even though you and I personally don't mean them any harm, from their perspective as a species, I don't mean them any harm, neither do you. But if I tell my neighbor, Reggie, that he takes a shotgun and head towards the woods, they've got a problem on their hands.
right.
And we're so unpredictable, and especially if they can mind speak and they can actually see what people are capable of. Because if they're touching your mind and they can share images and feelings and emotion, and they can also take those from you, they can read them, experience them. Can you imagine some of the nasty stuff that they've seen of our heads? Even if it's a memory of you watching a movie, you know what I mean? Can you imagine if they looked into your head and you would just watch like Pearl Harbor or something like that? They'd think we're
Right.
maniacs.
Well, I think they
So
already know that we have a violent nature. I think they already know that. I think they've been around a long time. I think they've seen. I think they've seen the American Indian War. I think they saw the Civil War. I think they saw things and know that we're violent. And they don't draw on cave walls. So if they're passing anything down, if there is a language, it's just like the Native Americans. It's a verbal pass down of history. So I think even now we're way past the Civil War and American Indian War, but that knowledge might still be there. And they say, "Hey, these people are very violent." You know, that could quite possibly be a be the answer. I don't know. You know what I mean?
oh,
But I think they
absolutely.
would. But I think they would know that there are some people that are innocent, and that they're not going to harm them, they're not going to hurt them. And like I said, if they mind speak, I'd love to have that conversation with them and say, hey, look, I'll keep my mouth shut. You know what I mean? I just,
Well,
I don't mean any harm. So, and I'm big on protection. I want them protected. I want property protected. I want them to have the land that they need and to survive and to carry on.
well, the other thing too, and one of my favorite movies, Men in Black, Agent K says individuals are smart, people are not.
Right.
We're basically crazy. And that's the thing. That's my perspective from the mind speak is that even though they may deem you and I are not a hostile, they're not worried about us. They're worried about the numbers of people once people find out. Because when we get together, we act a fool. I mean, we're idiots when we get together. Intelligence clearly drops in a large group very quickly. And I think that would be a concern that they would have because they would know that from touching our minds. And imagine what would happen again, another line from Men in Black, when Agent K tells Jay, yesterday you knew we were alone on this planet. What will you know tomorrow? And can you imagine if everyone knew we weren't alone, how they would react? And that's where that comes in. He says, well, people are, smart, this and that. He says, no, individuals are. You and I and Johnny would react great. Probably most of the people on the chat would all be fantastic, even a small group of us. But eventually, enough people are going to know, and it's going to get crazy, and that mob mentality will take over. And that's probably partially maybe you would explain our tendency to war, and
Right.
armies and structures and things like that. So they can see all that in our minds. My understanding of how mind speak works where they're communicating and they're basically reading your mind, your thoughts, your essence, so to speak. So I'm sure they can tell that some of us are non-threatening, but who knows the kind of people they've also connected with that are not non-threatening. Homicidal maniacs look just like everybody else. And if they connected with somebody like that, I can only imagine what they think of us as a species,
Right. Yeah. I had this one, we were talking about this one incident, and the guy was out in the field and felt that he got zapped. He used the term zapped. I got zapped. He got dizzy, felt nauseous, all these set tones. I want to go back to camp. Let's go back. I'm not feeling well. And it was really funny because my first, and it was two incidences, but on this particular incident, I was like, dude, the guy is extremely out of shape, very obese, hiking. I don't think he realized how far people were going to hike. See what I'm saying? And of course, he got dehydrated. Of course, he got tired. Of course, you know what I mean? But in his explanation was he got zapped. See what I'm saying? I felt I got zapped, that this creature is doing this to me because it doesn't want us here type attitude. Those are the things that you look at and you go, okay, we got two different ideas of what's going on here.
Yeah, humans, we get sick all the time for all kinds of reasons. I had that happen out at our main research area. I had put on a bunch of bug spray, which I put on almost every single day here at the house. And I'm walking through the woods, and all of a sudden my face, it's like it catches on fire. Everywhere I put that bug spray on was just burning like crazy. And then I kept walking, and I got water in the creek, and I'm, trying to get it all off. And then I hear a wood dog. I keep walking, and my lower back starts going out on me. And I'm out there by myself, and I'm like, oh, crap. Like, what is this? And then it's all in the back of my head. Oh, well, people talk about being zapped. Was that what it was? Kind of thinking that way. Well, come to find out, about a week later, I had shingles. So that's why, here I am thinking that, oh my God, these crazy people are right about this whole zapping thing, but it didn't have anything to do with it. I just had shingles, So,
I'd rather get zapped than have shingles, just so you know. So,
yeah, well, I tell you, it was not fun at all. But we get humans, and I'm not saying again, and all this stuff is, and I think people know this. When we talk about all these things, it's all hypothetical. This is the only time in my own personal research I don't spend time on any of this stuff. Like I literally only focus on the things that I find myself or interactions or things I've seen. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about all these hypotheticals and all this other stuff,
Right.
So any of this stuff that we're talking about, because some people get mad, especially people that are dead set that these creatures have abilities or they're spiritual or paranormal or whatever. That's fine if you're sold. You've been convinced. You've seen what you've seen. You know what you know. That's fine. But for me, there's just too many different options for me to say yes. And it's the same way with the primate people or people that think these creatures are some type of human. Any time you bring up something that's abnormal, they get mad and just throw everything else out. You said, well, when we started our group, the Sasquatch Encounter Brigade, that was our very first rule. Is we all think in that group that they're pretty much, but a couple people aren't exactly sold on it, but we think they're just biological creatures. But we are going to report everything that happens, whether it fits in our nice little box and in our paradigm or not, because that's not research. Research is not selecting what you want to fit your narrative so you can feed it back. And it's much easier. Like it would be as researchers, we'd get a lot more credibility if we just kept our mouth shut and just say, no, these are just regular, normal creatures, and that's the end of the line. Well, saying that makes you a liar because the fact of the matter is we have not accomplished long-term observation. Nobody has.
Right.
I mean, maybe the government has, maybe the government does, but us regular people, we have not. So there's just too many things that we don't know in order to be completely sold on a lot of aspects when it comes to these creatures, I think.
I agree.
Well, I want to clear something too to let everybody know. Johnny also sprays 100% DEET on his body, which I tell him is not good.
Hey, a funny story. When I went down there to go out with Richard and them, I had just bought, and it's Repel 100% DEET. I think it's like 99.9%. But I had a brand new battery pack. And I just got done spraying it all over me, and I guess I had some on the bottle, and I set it down on that battery pack, and it melted like the outside plastic of it. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm putting this on my body.
Yeah.
But it works.
Yeah, that's something I'd probably spray on my clothing, not on my skin.
You only live once. I probably got so much stuff from Iraq. There's no telling what's inside my system.
Right.
Cancer's going to get us all eventually, anyways.
Yeah. So, Brian, have you had any more before we end things? Have you had any more experiences besides that? Anything that you've that's really stuck out during your research?
I've had interesting things in the woods take place. I don't know that I wouldn't call it an experience because I didn't necessarily see anything. I've heard some things. There's certainly been some weird. Occasionally, you know how it is in the woods. You're out there. It's midnight. You're by yourself. You have a little fire going. Every now and again, I think I see a light or something, or maybe I get the feeling I'm being watched. Truth be told, it's just at the moment you set foot in the woods, you're absolutely being watched, probably by quite a large number of eyes. You just don't see it. Yeah. But look, I try to look at weather patterns. I don't rule anything out. I disagree with people say that they twist branches off. I don't. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. To me, it makes more sense that they would snap them off. They're huge, they're strong, it's at their height. Why would they bend down lower to twist something? To me, it doesn't make sense. And I could be completely wrong about that. But I'm more interested in photographic proof. I want to get evidence. I want to get a hair sample. I want to get a recording of them because those are things that you can duplicate.
All right. Now, let me ask
somebody can, you know what I'm saying? So some of the other stuff I don't necessarily attribute because if you, for example, with the trees, some people say that they make these forts. I look at the weather before I go into the woods. It's, what were the winds like? Has there been a big storm that's gone through there? Then I expect to see fallen down trees. I expect to see them look like they were twisted off, maybe just the way it fell and twisted. You know what I mean? There's certain things. So you see things that seem odd to me. I've seen trees that look like they could have been yanked out of the ground, but it could have been something natural too. I can't prove what it did it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm looking for something very specific. I mean, I document everything. I take notes, that kind of thing. I want to make sure I have every detail accounted for to review in case there's something I miss. But I'm looking for something very specific that can be reproduced. Now, when I look for a broken branch, if I see something that looks like it was snapped, what I'm looking for is on the other branches, is there any chance that a hair got caught, a hair sample? Did they cut themselves? Is there any kind of blood sample, the ground or leaves? That's what I'm looking for. I want to see, and maybe it'll be something else. I have no idea. It could be raccoon, it could be bear. I don't know. But that's what I'm looking for. I want to find something that's indisputable. And then we can establish, okay, now they exist. Now let's get some resources. We understand that there's some kind of biological creature out there or not. Maybe it's both. I don't know. Assuming it becomes corporeal, I'm assuming if it takes a solid form, that it has certain features. I could be wrong. I don't know. Just operating on both sides. I don't dismiss anything. But I specifically look for certain things when I look for that. I want to see a footprint. Great. So now where are the branches around that footprint? Is it possible a tree branch could have snagged it? I want to rope that area off and literally go over with a magnifying glass and see if I can't find some kind of anything that proves there's a DNA sample that's something that we don't know about is out there. Whether it's a Sasquatch or something else, at least there's some DNA evidence. That's what I'm after. So
yeah,
I don't necessarily.
I think one of the things that confuses me is people that lay things out for them, not food, but trinkets and different things. Then they come back and say, well, it was moved. Well, bag it, because if he picked it up and moved it, there's DNA on there. So
Yeah,
bag it.
but then what's that's the problem with that is what's the next step? $56,000 worth of DNA. I mean, what? That's the only problem with DNA for me on my level is I can't afford to spend 12 grand on running a DNA test.
No, I agree. I can't either. My thing is if, for example, there's a footprint.
Oh yeah, that's what I tell people. If you're
if there's a footprint, if there's a broken branch, and you find a hair sample, I would take all this evidence and I would just put it out there. I'd put it out there to everybody. Hey, this is what I found. Here's the evidence. Does anybody have access to a DNA lab that's reputable? I would probably even contact local colleges, universities, things like that. I mean, I would, hell, if I had to, I'd start a GoFundMe for it to get the thing tested. And I would
that's definitely a way to go.
I've made that comment that if you've got DNA, scat, hair, whatever, and it's sitting in your freezer, it's absolutely worthless unless you're going to spend the money to get it DNA tested.
Yeah, that's always been the problem with this, and that's the biggest problem altogether with doing the research. Is our greatest advantage is technology, and technology is expensive. So, and personally, that's kind of my goal. Is I would love to, if nothing else, if I can't prove it 100% on my own, I would like to prove it enough to get someone with the funds to actually, take it seriously. But what do you have a last question for you, and we'll let you go, Brian. What is your goal in doing this? Is this just self-exploration, or do you have something that you're actually trying to accomplish?
Well, I think there's I guess you could say a bigger picture out there. I think, I have seen things on the paranormal, the supernatural side as well. I think there's reasons to believe that everything exists. As far as cryptids, some cryptids exist. There are certainly evidence that there are certain phenomenon on the paranormal side that exists too, and maybe it is all connected. I don't know, but I'd like to find out. To me, it's the next step. It's like what is next is a challenge. There's something out there. We know enough to know there's something. We just don't know enough to know what it is. And there's no wrong answer. And not to mention too, it's 2025. We're at a point in technology where who knows, in 20 years, we'll be laughing at this conversation because we'll have an app on our cell phone that could scan hair and tell us what it came from. That's probably not that out of the realm of possibility, but you know what I'm saying? We're at a point technologically where things are going to get a lot easier for us in the next couple of decades because we're not really far away from that kind of stuff. And as far as cryptidparanormal.com, I created that as kind of a collaboration because a lot of people do think everything is connected. People do think it's both. It's paranormal. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm saying we don't know. So as far as I'm concerned, both parties have equal stance to say that they're correct because we don't know any different. And the idea is just to kind of create an environment where everybody can come together and we may decide that in fact we're both wrong, we're both right. Maybe it is some kind of both, or perhaps they are both real but two separate things. But it's when we isolate from each other, we don't communicate, we don't get on forums like this, we don't share our stories, and all we have to go off is what people see, what they document, what they feel. And even if you feel static on your arm hairs go up, that's something. There's something happens. Something that's not usual happens. Is it related to Sasquatch? Probably not. Maybe. But is it related to something? Sure. And it could be something like, well, why are they there? You know what I mean? There's so many different questions to go down. And there's so many different theories that come from it. My goal is to, one, I want to improve my own knowledge, because when I was 16, I saw something that scared the hell out of me. And all I've wanted to do ever since is go back and get a picture of it and maybe spend a little bit more time staring at it. But it's personal curiosity. I think it's just human nature to want to explore. I think there's, especially with the internet, we have a real opportunity. There are so many intelligent people out there. We all have different backgrounds, resources, connections, things like that. If we all put our heads together and somebody gets some decent proof, and we can all actually figure out a way to cooperate and work together and just accept that there's an answer, why don't we get it? And then we can argue about what it means later. If we all coordinate like that, we can really get some stuff done here. We can make some advancements in this field that is unprecedented until now. And hopefully we'll continue to move towards that goal.
Well, I 100% agree with you, man. I think that's along with technology, our ability to communicate with one another is about the only. We don't have very many advantages when it comes to these creatures, but like you're saying, I think working together along with the technology. I wouldn't be doing this if I thought it was impossible. I think it's possible, and I think there's so many people getting involved now, and the technology's gotten so much better with the internet, the communication, and that's how I learned. The majority of what I learned is by listening to other people's experiences online and podcasts, learning, what these things do and what to look for and everything else. If you hit the nail on the head, man. And hopefully we can that's what we need, more collaboration in this field. But anyway, Brian, we appreciate you coming on, bud.
Hey, Brian, go ahead and tell everybody about your website and how they can reach you or see what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. cryptidparanormal.com. You can send me a message from there. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We have blog entries on cryptidparanormal.com. We have photos from investigations, things like that. There's statements people send in. We have an encounters page, and we ask anyone, if you've seen anything and you don't want to talk about it on a podcast, that's completely fine. Write it down, send it in. We copy and paste it from the email as received. We do not edit it. We do not fix grammar. We do not fix language. You say it, we publish it. So if you have something you'd like to share, by all means, I'd like to hear it. I'd like to get it out there so other people can learn from it. And then other than that, we'll be at the Kansas City Paracon coming up here August 2nd. So anyone out in the Kansas City area will be at the Chumming with the Spirits Podcast LLC booth. So I hope to see anyone in the Kansas, Missouri area out there.
Also, you're about to get into a new venture. You want to talk about that in August?
Yes, we will be. I'll be dropping my first podcast August 4th. And it'll be a weekly podcast dropping Monday nights.
Monday nights,
man. Well, hopefully you're not using StreamYard. Hopefully you've learned your lesson. Well, good luck with that, man. And again, it was nice meeting you, and a lot of very useful information. You definitely thought this out a lot, and I wish you the best and good luck with everything.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Oh, absolutely, man. I think I've made another friend.
That's right.
Good to go. Well, I also want to thank everybody except for, who was it, Stuart?
Yeah, Stuart.
I hope everybody has a great evening except for Stuart. I'm just kidding, Stuart. All All
Yeah,
right,
real
fellas.
quick before we go, just let everybody know that, make sure that you check us out on Facebook as well. We're on YouTube, so check us out. Let people know. Also, Johnny does has his research page on research channel on YouTube, and he's also has a Facebook page, and he's doing some great things. He posts on there, and I also have a Facebook and YouTube channel. So please check us out, show support, and we greatly appreciate all you guys. You guys are awesome.
Yep. Y'all have a
All
good
right,
evening.
guys. All right, take care, and we'll be talking to you soon. All right, Ryan.
Sounds good. Talk to you guys soon.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right, Johnny. Great show. Guy was
Yeah, man.
awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And we got some great shows coming up. So I believe looking at the schedule next week, me and you have the Friday off. And then week following that is Steve Coles. So looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, that should be a good one. Look forward to it.
Yeah.
All right,
All right, Johnny.
everyone.
You have a great weekend and get that basement done and get some good internet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. Y'all have a good one.
All right, buddy.
All right. Bye.
Bye. All right, guys. We'll be talking to you guys later. You guys take care. God bless. Get out there, get squatching, have a great time, and remember, just live a positive life. Be positive, say positive things. Our chat room is amazing. You guys are always polite with each other, very respectful. You understand each other, you accept each other, and that is awesome. So God bless each and every one of you guys. Have a great weekend.